Hi everyone, my name is Grigory Trofimov. I'm a senior solution engineer at Parasoft, and today we are data driving API tests using Parasoft SOAtest. Why might we want to data drive tests? Well, data driven tests are a best practice for test automation. So if you're looking for an efficient, scalable test automation strategy, you're going to want to make sure that you're testing with appropriate data. So the more test data you have, typically the greater test coverage and the greater application coverage you're going to be able to achieve with all those different permutations of inputs and verifiable outcomes. Additionally, maintaining an external data source is much more convenient and easier than updating hard-coded test steps in clients. So if you do want to add additional rows of data, maybe some negative test cases, uh, modify them in some ways, it's much easier to do that in a CSV file or an Excel spreadsheet than a, uh, a hard-coded test step. So in our example today, we're going to be testing a camping store demo application. We went ahead and actually created a test for us to start with. It's got some API calls here to add items to a shopping cart, create an order, and then call another get operation to actually get that order information to verify that it got created and that all the data is consistent there. And we also have a data source in a CSV file here with some item IDs, quantities, names, basically everything we need to parameterize our test. So first things first, let's go ahead and add this data source to our test. Parasoft supports a broad number of data sources. External databases are a great way to store large quantities of test data. Excel spreadsheets, CSV files, built-in tables, all the above pretty much covers the full gambit of data sources you might need for your tests. So we're going to go ahead and select CSV file here. We're going to give our data source a name. And we're going to select the file that we want to use as a data source. And we'll just confirm that it's able to read the file and pull column names from the CSV file. Now let's go back to our test steps. As you can see, all of our values here are hard-coded. And so if we want to parameterize a value to the data source, we simply select the field and say parameterized. And usually it's able to pick up the column name that it needs to parameterize to. Additionally, we can actually right-click a payload and say populate, and it's going to try to match the names of the JSON objects or XML objects, whatever payload type you're using, to the column names. And it's actually able to do so in this case. Let's do the same with our orders. Populate. There it is. So it went ahead and matched up locations, receiver ID. But the event ID and event number we actually don't have good values for. So what we'll do here is we're actually going to add a new test step called the data generator tool. And the data generator tool allows us to generate numbers, strings, dates, etc. In this case, we're going to simply add a number generator here for our ID. We'll call it event ID. And we'll set some constraints for this generation, like a min and a max number. And then we're going to go ahead and add another one here. This one is the event number. And we'll give it a name, event number. And we're going to use the same constraints. So now if we go back to our payload here, we're going to parameterize those values to the event ID and the event number. We'll save that. And first things first, let's go ahead and run the test. and make sure that some of these API calls are getting called correctly as expected. It looks like our test ran, and we can confirm that it's iterating over our data source by looking at the test traffic. So we can see that it's iterating over the data source, iterating over the item IDs and the quantities. However, our last API call here is not really calling anything. It's just got an empty order number that it's calling. And what we want to do here is we want to use a value from one of our previous API calls, right? So there's a test step here to create an order, and it's going to return an order number. And so we're just going to go ahead and grab that order number. We're going to store it in an order number variable. If we want to reuse these values in some other downstream tests, we can create a writable data source and store it in a writable data source column. But there's that. We went ahead and added our parameterization. What this does is this creates a JSON databank on our previous API call that we're now using to pass that value downstream. And then finally, we want to automate our validations and assertions. So in the response field, in the response payload traffic payload, what we're going to do is we're going to add a JSON asserter. And we're going to do a value assertion on, let's say, the status. And we can data drive this and parameterize this to our verifiable outcomes in our data source, which is the status field. And we'll do another one here for the message. Okay, let's go ahead and rerun our test. Great, so 12 out of 12 tests succeeded, test steps. If we look at the traffic for our final API call here, our get call, we can see that the order number is getting passed in the URL path. We can see that our status element and our message is being validated. And this test is ready to go. We can now push this test into our source control management system or up to our CI/CD pipeline. So in conclusion, if you're looking to achieve a scalable, efficient test automation strategy, data drive your tests, and you can use Parasoft SOAtest to do that. This will help you find bugs and regressions earlier in your software development lifecycle.